Hey guys, we've got an Unjuggle the Struggle with Friends episode for you today, and we are talking all things relationships, especially with those ever evolving friendships. I know how important community and connection is in my life, so Emily walks us through a quick 3-word phrase that we can ask to help keep all parties on the same page and provide some fresh perspectives on how we approach our relationships with others. You're invited into our raw coffee chat where our on location microphones are average at best. But I promise you that the conversation will leave you with the relatable reminder we all need about navigating through this journey alongside others. Let's dive in. All right. Hey guys, thanks for joining another episode. This is Unjuggle the Struggle, and we are doing it coffee chat style. So that means I've got my girlfriend here, Emily. Excited to have you. Thank you for joining today.
Thanks for having me here.
You're
This is great.
welcome. I love it. So we're set up. We do have our coffee. So cheers to that. Cheers. All right. So today, guys, Emily has got some really good stuff for us. Something that I know we all struggle with is relationships. So before we get into that, Emily, who are we talking to? Tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, I'm Emily. I am a mother of two very little ones. I am married to the most amazing man that I could ever express. He's everything that I want to be and has made me into everyone that I am.
Oh, he's pretty sweet.
He's pretty cool.
I like him.
Pretty cool.
We can keep him.
We can keep him. I concur. I am an only child who has an extraordinarily strong mother who, for all the good, sometimes a lot of the hard, has made me into who I am. And I am so thankful for who she is and how she has made me into the person, the mom, the wife, the friend that I am today. I worked in HR, more specifically employee relations, for almost 11 years. I can easily say that that is probably the highlight of my career. Being able to talk with people through every aspect of their life, even as something as simple as I just need a place to cry. That has been probably one of the biggest gifts that has also been given to me in my life, outside of my husband, my family, my friends. Yeah. And then as of 2 years ago, almost a year ago, I quit the corporate role and embarked in this journey of momhood, which is nuts. It is nuts. It is not, it's beautiful, but it is harsh at the same time, but I'm loving it. It is great. And I have the opportunity to be here with you and to know so many amazing, wonderful women. And I'm so thankful to be here.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. Thank you for sharing your story. Absolutely. Thank you for coming on so boldly, especially too when it was like, hey, we're going to talk about relationships because that is it's a hard one. And I think relationships, especially with your background, navigating them not only from a professional side, but then like you've shared, even over the last year, the way that you utilize those skills in a lot of your personal relationships too. So with relationships, I mean, this could be work, this could be with family, this could be friends, this could be
yourself.
Yeah. So where are we starting?
Oh my gosh.
With this?
I've been thinking about that quite a bit and really trying to prepare what avenue we go down. And I think where I want to take this is a relationship with yourself, because the relationship that you have with yourself is so powerful and so it shapes the relationships with everybody around you, whether that be your spouse, it be your girlfriend, it be a coworker, it be your children. How you feel and how you handle yourself does ultimately dictate the relationship with others.
Absolutely. It's your inner, right? It's the outward expression of your inner person, your inner dialogue, your inner conflict management.
100%. And ultimately how you perceive what others are doing around you.
Yeah. And we're all bidding for connection.
Always.
All day long.
Always.
Whether these are relationships that you've had for 30 years or whether this is a new relationship, you're constantly like testing that ground a little bit.
And you grow and you change.
And you grow. Yeah. And I think that that's where I know recently, especially for me, the relationships where I'm growing so much right now. Those are the relationships that are really being tested
Yeah.
for
I believe
me.
that.
And yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So those are, that's where I'm kind of looking at some of my own relationships and just asking myself some really great questions that I know you and I have talked about in
Yeah.
coffee chats. So kind of take us there.
My gosh. So to begin on that, I think first and foremost is I think us as individuals, for right, wrong, or indifference, we love to have things be about us. Not saying that's a
Mhm.
wrong thing, not saying that that's the right thing, but it is a reality of sometimes being human.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times too, when we look at relationships, we're going to look at situations that may not have anything to do with us, but because of whatever state of mind that we're in or whatever is going on in our personal life, it really easy become something that we own. And I think a lot of times we have to take that opportunity to step back and say, does this really own me?
Yeah.
Do I part in this?
Do you have a personal,
Hmm.
like story or experience
I
that
do.
you could share?
So when I was younger, and I think this is probably one of the more influential experiences that I had as I started becoming an adult. It was my first real job out of college, and I had a boss who is still, she means everything to me, and I owe this woman so many things in my life.
Oh.
Granted, I can't share her name, but um, I will never forget this conversation. I was this, hot-headed 21-year-old coming into corporate America, right? Like, what
Whoa,
business do I have?
whoa, Betsy, watch out, Emily,
And
coming down the
I'm coming.
tracks.
And it just as I did it, I think I had a lot of insecurities. And one of my favorite go-to sayings was, "Are you mad at me? Are you mad at me?
Are you
Oh,
mad
you
at
must be
me?
mad at me. They're mad at me." And I can't even remember what was going on, but I had built this false reality up in my brain that, my boss was mad at me. She didn't want to do anything for me and wasn't giving me the time of day. I was failing and just all the feels were coming out. And her and I were having this pretty simplistic one-on-one. And I just like, "You're mad at me." She's like, "What?" It's just like, okay, okay, okay. Like, let's kind of talk about this a little bit. And she's like, Emily, no. And she's like, "But
Mm.
I hear you." And she's like, "One of the things that I think would be really good to practice, not only for us, but I think when you're dealing, as you're starting your role in employee relations and you're starting just becoming the adult that you're growing into be, when you're looking at relationships or you're looking at managing whatever conflict is in front of you, start with, are we okay?" And that
That's a great
simplistic
tool.
phrase was incredible because she followed up with it and said, 9 out of 10 times what somebody else is going through or the way that they're presenting something has nothing to do with you. But again, as individuals, we love to sometimes take the opportunity of is about me. And
Yeah.
it's so true.
Yeah.
And there are so many things as humans that we're contending with day to day, whether it's, you stubbed your toe on the door, just you got your belt caught in the handle. It just nothing was going your way. You left the laundry in there. You were late to work. Whatever it might be. It's just
That false
the
reality that you
false
start creating
yes,
for yourself that like this is my
yes,
life. This is my
right,
relationship with this
yes,
person, or this is like that's how, and then that's that you thought you weren't showing up that way
correct.
before. Oh, now you can't even escape it.
Escape it, not at
Yeah.
all. And I think that's true for everybody else that comes into whatever environment. They might have something going on that dictates how they're presenting in that moment.
Mhm.
And then others around them be like, "Oh no, I'm also feeling a certain way. They did this. Oh, that must mean that they feel this way about me." And then we create this storm that is sometimes we can't break away from it, and it has imploded into this monster that is so difficult to handle when in reality we could have just said, "Hey, are we okay?"
Are we okay?
And yeah,
I appreciate too that and something you and I have always talked about in
yeah.
our conversations is just this. One of the things we love about ourselves, but
Yes.
also we're very aware of it, is our heightened sense
Mm,
of accountability,
mhm,
where
mhm.
we will. So we'll own our side.
Yes.
We'll own our side all day long, which is why I feel comfortable asking you this. What about when we've done the work,
Yeah.
we have taken accountability for our actions, but what about if that's not what we feel like
Oh
we're
gosh.
receiving
Yeah.
in the relationship? Like it's not
Yeah.
either being matched, or I mean, you can feel when a relationship is no longer
Absolutely.
connected, when you're just sitting there butting heads, when it's an emotional uh not quite sure the word I'm looking for, but when it's just like draining the
It is.
emotional bank
Yeah.
account.
Yep. You're becoming burnout.
So you're
Mhm.
becoming burnout.
You're
So
becoming burnout.
so then what?
I think that's a really good point of conversation, and I think that is one that is often easily overlooked. And again, when we talked about relationships, one of the things that I think is really important to focus on is the relationship you have with yourself. And I know for me as an individual, accountability and being genuine are very, very important for me. And I think both knowingly and unknowingly, I put that expectation very highly on myself, but then also on others. And I think sometimes, especially right now, I've been put in positions where I have to ask myself, is that okay? And at what point, when you're navigating a relationship where maybe you walk away from it and you're constantly feeling exhausted, you're feeling drained,
Mm-hmm.
you're feeling that burnout feeling, at what point does that become your responsibility to take that step back and say, okay, am I placing the right expectations here
For yourself
for
or
yourself and for that
for both?
relationship?
I
Mhm.
I feel like right now in our culture, we rarely hear the word burnout
Yeah,
associated with relationships.
I
So I'm
agree.
loving this
Mhm.
take that you're bringing on it
Mhm.
because it's so true. I mean,
Yep.
especially I think about friendships of so maybe friends and family
Yes,
because that's where we tend to have our long-standing
correct.
relationships. That's where we just I mean, you try so hard.
You do.
You just keep showing up and you just keep showing up and you just
Until
keep showing up to the point of
you have nothing else to show up with.
and then
Yep.
the stuff hits the
It hits
fan
the fan.
and and then you're stuck
Yeah.
in this moment where you're
Yeah.
being honestly, you're being gifted an opportunity to grow. It
You are.
stinks.
It hurts.
It it hurts. It
Mhm.
really hurts because you're then looking back at all the times that you took maybe more accountability than you needed to,
Yes.
and and then was that even? I guess to that point, was that even fair to the other person?
No. Mhm.
But now they're kind of paying for it equally,
Yep.
and so then where do you go from there? So I think maybe
Mhm.
two places my brain is going is like, how do you recognize this burnout?
Yep.
And I know you kind of already touched on just you keep showing up, the emotional bank is tapped.
Yep.
Are there any other signs you think that hey, in
Yeah.
these relationships, like this is burnout we're experiencing?
Yeah.
Any other signs?
I do think so. I think any that moment you feel angst, and again, this comes back to that conversation that we were kind of having when we first started out, is practicing that, "Are we okay?" And that can be
Yeah,
either with another person or that can even be with yourself. I think the moment that you are starting to feel that something isn't right, listen to that
and ask.
and ask whether
Yeah.
that's another person or also sitting there and asking yourself, "Hey, am I okay?"
Mhm.
And really trying to take an opportunity to understand maybe what might be stemming from that. So I had a recent situation in my life where, I think I'm still trying to navigate through it and still trying to really understand what that growth is from it. But the takeaway that I learned is I did not practice that. And I can be very honest and say for since I had that lesson at 21 years old,
Yeah.
I have had that be part of my everyday life. And this was one situation where I didn't.
Mm.
And what I did is I had all these signs. I was exhausted. I didn't feel good. I felt empty. But I ignored it because I kept telling myself, it'll be okay. I can show up again next time. I can keep doing this. I got this. It's okay if I was hurt. Maybe I deserved it. Maybe I should own a little bit more in that when in reality, I don't know if that was it.
So painful to hear how harsh
Yes,
we are with
to ourselves.
ourselves. Yeah, like
And
it's
that we allow it.
we allow
We
it, we
allow it.
accept it over and over again.
Yeah. And then what ended up happening is there was this event and I was not capable of showing up the way I wanted to be. And I
Mm.
think that was a very hard lesson for me to learn is because that's not who I am. I can still show up. Well, I have more periods of quiet or just, yeah, but to not be engaged at all, that was a very hard pill for me to swallow. And I think the realization is had I gone back in time and said, there wasn't something right about this incident or that incident or all these compounding situations that happened, I didn't take the time to say, "Hey, are we okay?" Or "Am I okay?" Because I think had I practiced that and actually taken that opportunity to have those difficult conversations then, I wouldn't be here today. And I think that's a really hard pill to swallow, especially when we talk about accountability.
I do too.
I own that. I
Wow.
do. Do
Yeah.
I own what maybe other people do? No, you can't control what other people do at the end of the day, but you can control what you do. And what you do can be asking a simple question of, are we okay?
Yeah. Yep.
And I didn't practice that, and that hurts.
Yeah, it does. I love that
Yeah.
unjuggle the
Mhm.
relationship struggle tip
Yeah.
of just like having, I think you've kind of said
Mhm.
it before, having that conversation sooner rather than later.
Correct.
And part of that conversation or even that initial starting
Yeah.
point is just that simple phrase, are
3
we
letters
okay?
or 3 words.
Yeah, are
Are
we
we
okay?
okay?
Yeah. And
Mhm.
then for me, I know too, I'm thinking about one of the times that I was experiencing
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying. We had relationships, Shane and I have relationships that are 30 plus years old.
Mhm.
And so as we continue to grow through our life, I think back to the car ride that I've shared with
Yeah.
everybody where I'm sitting there and I'm like, there's got to be more to life than this. I'm doing like what am I doing wrong? One of the things that I realized where I had to be really intentional about the deep work that I had to do.
Yeah.
It was our relationships with our friends.
Mhm.
These folks that we had deeply rooted relationships with, folks that we had dreamed with.
Mhm.
Let's raise our babies together, and
Mhm.
and those dreams weren't coming true, and the I would say the level of effort it felt unmatched.
Yeah.
So then when we were starting to create opportunities again to start building the relationship, the anxiety
Yeah.
started coming in. It started feeling forced and then sitting there going, wait, I'm not okay with this anymore.
Correct.
I'm not okay with carrying these
Yeah.
relationships.
I'm sick
And
of reaching over that 50-50 yard line.
yeah,
Yeah.
and to being able to take the accountability that, okay, I did that, but then also, and I think this is where it's less natural,
Mhm.
being able to say, yep, but they're not trying either.
Yeah.
They're not trying either. And I know for me, I had to really start to become okay with
Yeah.
outgrowing the relationship. So it was one of those, there were several that were, I hate to say it because again, it sounds so selfish, but I think
Mhm.
sometimes we have to be. There were so many relationships in my life that were no longer serving
Yeah.
me. And it's not about like, oh, what can everybody do for me?
No, not
It's
at
not
all.
that at all. It's
Or
that they
saying that
were
they're bad people or bad whatever.
correct.
It's the
Yeah.
relationship served its time.
It had served
And
its
when is it okay to
time.
say it's okay?
Exactly. So
Mhm.
it had been just, it's okay if relationships, if you outgrow
Yeah.
relationships, and that's allowed.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful
It
evolution,
is a beautiful evolution.
but there's
Yep.
also a grieving process.
There is a grieving process with saying goodbye or letting something run its course.
And of course,
Mhm.
I do look back at some of those relationships too. I think it's something that I'm working through, um, and even the new relationships that I'm working on forming,
Yeah.
the way that I'm approaching those with expectations and equally without
Yeah.
expectation, like, right, that's such a weird balance too. Like you have to
And
like what are two things that you expect in like for you
yeah.
personally relationships, like what are two things
Accountability and being genuine.
which you would
Yeah.
think is not that crazy, right?
But I think for some it is. And that's where it
It
comes
is.
back to is I think with the messaging that you're talking about and things that we talked about is the expectation you have for yourself, okay, to hold on to others.
Is it okay?
And
Or what do you think?
yes and no, but I think where part of that exercise is you got to look at the relationship and kind of ask yourself, is this one you want to hold on to? At the end of the
Mhm.
day, are the positives outweighing those cons? Because every relationship, regardless of who it's with, what it's with, ebbs and flows are natural. They're normal. We can't have harmony 100% of the time. And I think to expect harmony at 100% of the time may
Yeah.
not be healthy.
So it's maybe what are the expectations of the
Yes.
relationship?
And if you have another person in your life, or maybe a couple in your life, whatever it might be, I think also looking at where they're able to meet you because maybe they're not holding that same expectation or the same priorities or the core values that you do.
Mhm.
Maybe accountability and being genuine are not as important to them. That doesn't make them bad people.
Correct.
It doesn't. It just means that they have different priorities,
And therefore they're going to hold a different type of relationship
even with
in
us.
your world.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think part of the exercise when you're evaluating what relationships are in your life, it's okay, knowing that they're different because people are different. And that's the beauty of people is that we're all so different and
Mhm.
beautiful and unique in our ways.
Yeah.
And, sometimes those differences are something we want in our life and sometimes they're not. But you do need to be willing to ask yourself, if it's something that you do want in your life, are you okay allowing a different expectation for that relationship, because that's what that relationship is capable of.
Yeah, something you
Mhm.
said that I kind of, full transparency, like kind of got triggered
Yeah.
a little bit about was like, well, are, is this person that you're trying to have this relationship with, are they capable
Yeah.
of like meeting you where you're at, or are they capable of it, or and that's I'm having flashbacks to, like, for instance, I think about the way that a relationship changes with a girlfriend,
Yes.
maybe why she's pregnant,
Yeah.
and you're like, you right, like you almost like become this like supportive mother figure as
You
you're trying
do.
to get her through this
Yes.
very like stressful
It
up
is
inside down
stressful.
time, and you're like, and having, and I'm thinking of one girlfriend in particular. I absolutely love her. Um, but yeah,
Mhm.
there was an amount of grace that I feel like was acceptable because she was in
Yes.
a different phase of her life. However, there's also I have to say it. There are minimum expectations, like the can you be genuine? Can you
Various
be
thresholds that still need to be met to allow the relationship
uh-huh,
to work.
uh-huh. And also back to what you were saying too about just like the growth
Yeah.
of the relationship, the growth of people. I absolutely also believe that relationships can ebb and flow in and out of that
Oh
synchronicity
yeah.
where, so maybe while she's pregnant, it feels very one sided.
Hmm.
That's okay. And then there's a period postpartum where you're like, it's still a little one sided.
Hmm.
But then now we're getting to a point where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, it's been a couple
Yeah.
years. Are we gonna do this again? Or maybe
Yeah.
has this just we've outgrown, and
Yes.
that's okay. And I love you and you love me, and
But we're different,
we're
and that is
different,
okay.
and that's okay.
Hmm.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Any other thoughts on that?
No, I think that's a very beautiful way to put it, because it's almost kind of like seasons as well.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
I think that's a great situation to bring up.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's just sometimes people change, and that is okay.
That is okay. So if we're
Mhm.
unjuggling the struggle, like some of the tips you and I are both going to kind of think about here, and this actually, I love this because when we kind of talked earlier, this goes right into the area of your life that
Yes.
you feel like you have unjuggled this struggle a little bit.
Yes.
Yes.
Still learning. That's part of growth.
Still learning. Yes, yes. So if we're unjuggling
Yeah.
like the relationships, just you got to start somewhere. So just make sure you're starting from the right starting point. It's
Yes.
not that inner dialogue just pressing
Yeah.
outward.
Question yourself. And I
Mhm.
think when you have those feelings, listen to them. Don't maybe act on them, but listen to them and try to better understand why you're feeling the way that you are.
Love that clarification.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Root
because I
cause.
think it's important too.
Yeah, agreed.
Mhm.
And then having
The
the
conversation,
conversation.
especially is something as simple, and keep those conversations easy. Like, are we okay? That is it's non-intrusive. It's a very easy conversation, but one of the things that I would add into that is, if you're going to ask that question, whether it's with yourself or it's with somebody else, it's be willing to engage in the conversation regardless of where it leads.
Mm.
And one of the other things that I think has been a really important lesson and kind of a mantra that I've had throughout my life is listen to hear, don't listen to respond.
Oh,
And when you're having that conversation of trying to get to the better understand what we're feeling, or getting that clarification when you're asking, are we okay? If that other person does share information, be willing to hear it
mhm.
and make sure that you're in a position to hear it, because if you're not, that conversation may not go well.
Yeah. I think about how
Hmm.
often, and I really learned this lesson. I will say it was in the corporate setting,
Yeah.
and then was fortunate enough to be able to apply it to personal. But it was like the loudest person in the room is not always the smartest one,
Sure.
and so would you be kind of debating across the boardroom table a little bit,
Oh,
and
I like that.
how folks like if you paused when a rebuttal had just come your way, if you're paused, it was almost like we were conditioned that then you didn't know your
Yes.
stuff, you weren't as
Correct.
you weren't as articulate, you weren't,
You weren't prepared.
and you weren't prepared. And the moment that I stopped like having that outward expectation pressed on to me
Yeah.
about how I was supposed to respond, the moment that I actually started realizing that if I just gave myself an extra second to make sure that I really heard
Yeah.
what just came at me. I didn't have to respond with
Correct.
like on the drop of a hat. I had to respond in a manner, but
Mhm.
it was okay to number one say that if I needed to marinate on something a little
Yes.
bit, and then also to just having the pause with my response. It let my brain
Digest.
calculate and digest
Mhm.
what had just come at me. And my response is, when I figured that out, nobody beat me. It's
No, it's
beautiful.
beautiful.
It's beautiful because then you're actually
Yes.
communicating, you're
You
actually
are communicating.
connecting.
Yes. And
Yeah,
you're not walking away with misconstrued or misunderstood communication.
correct. Yep.
Because when you're quick to respond, oftentimes we misunderstand what's being communicated.
Yes.
Or when we don't pause, if we're still saying, oh, that didn't set right, you miss the opportunity to say, hey, can you clarify this? What I'm hearing is this.
Yes.
And again, I do think sometimes more often than not, it's no, 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 that's not what I meant. Here's what I actually meant. And
Mhm.
again, you actually engage in the art of communicating.
Yes. Love that.
Mhm.
I feel like we could, I mean, from relationships, like if we wanted to dive deep into family relationships or
Oh
friend
gosh.
relationships or work relationships, I mean, we could do another gazillion
Oh,
podcasts. So I don't
yes.
know. Maybe we will. Maybe we will. But I know this has already been really helpful, just in even being
Yeah.
able to kind of stir up some of the things of where I'm at with my relationship.
Mhm.
So I just so appreciate you
Oh gosh.
bringing forth like the burnout. I thought that was
Yeah.
brilliant.
Mhm.
And yeah, it just goes, oh my gosh, I wonder, and it so makes you kind of I'm going to be thinking about that
Yeah.
later. So just thank you for that
Oh my gosh.
gift.
Thank you for talking about it.
Yeah, you're
Again, the
welcome.
beauty of talking, it's amazing what conversation can do
It's so good.
and everything. It's a
Awesome.
beautiful thing.
I love it.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share?
I don't think so.
You
I
did
think this
great.
was great.
Wonderful. All right, guys. Until next time.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.